Good day, everyone. This is Tom Rieger, and with us today also is Tracy Blackburn, who's with Platform 3 Solutions. And we're going to talk about our collaboration around bringing AI-powered content decommissioning the right way, how to clean out the old to bring in the new. A very different take on an idea of how you can use AI and bring a capability together to help you understand and reconcile what you have so you can decide what you should do next. Also, I did mention this is fourth in a series. For those of you who have not watched any of the previous ones, I will, after the webinar, send links out to those. I especially like setting a tone and a foundation around that AI 101 session. And then we start getting into other use cases around how you can create a better client experience or employee experience from a conversational AI perspective, but also do some social listening to understand what is the world thinking of you, and taking in that unstructured data and bringing that together with some structured data to get an idea of what the world looks like from a predictive perspective. And thankfully, everyone answered this for me because I want to get a tone from the audience around your thoughts on artificial intelligence. And this has been pretty constant across the series, but especially in the world of app decomm, where AI can help you kind of clean out the data center. So thank you for that, because 88% of you kind of or very much are kind of knocking at the topic of artificial intelligence. Now with that, I'll hand it over to Tracy, where he'll start talking a bit more about application decommissioning. Over to you, Tracy.
Thanks, Tom. As Tom mentioned, this is Tracy Blackburn with Platform 3 Solutions. We're an OpenText partner. Have been working with OpenText for quite some time on application decommissioning in Enterprise Archive, and we've recently added Magellan to the offering. The reason we decided to partner with OpenText around Magellan is because we've got a tremendous amount of experience in decommissioning legacy systems, most of which traditionally we run into are structured data. The ERPs of the world for healthcare folks, the EMRs or EHRs, a lot of structured data in there, some content, but most of the concern is structured data. That said, there's a lot of unstructured or semi-structured systems and even file systems that folks want to consolidate and decommission for cost and compliance reasons. And in some cases, you've got access to information through metadata. In other cases, you just have content that it's difficult to make your way through. So that's one of the reasons we extended the partnership, and Tom will work to tie that together after we get through a little bit about application decommissioning here as we go forward. So there's a couple of things I want to talk about. First is what the theoretical bounds portfolio, when I say theoretical, because this is what we would like it to look like, what more often than not it does look like. You know, IT organizations are really good at standing up new applications and deploying those applications through their life cycle until they're in enterprise production and providing the most amount of value that you're going to get out of that application within the organization. And then theoretically, what you want to do is, as those applications mature, is start the process over, spin down the older applications, consolidate the data, and spin up the new applications, and the cycle goes through loop and repeats. Unfortunately, what we see more often is this somewhat distorted portfolio. I think we can probably all relate to this, where we start off and we're working on a lot of new applications. Some of those applications make it into production, and some don't. But still, the same thing is true. IT organizations are excellent at standing up new applications, operationalizing and running those applications, but they don't typically staff with the notion of application decommissioning. So as applications mature, they go on to this state of senility, and then ultimately, unfortunately, we end up with what we'll call a zombie applications crawling around, eating everything in your data center, and you don't know how they got there and how they got loose or how to get rid of them. And that's often the place that we find ourselves in large organizations that have been around for a while. and organizations that have done a lot of M&A. Like, we've got a question. So can you think of some technologies in your data center that should be retired? So yes, absolutely, maybe, no. Anybody who answers no, we all envy you. All right, so let's see, we've got, not terribly surprising, 69%. Yes, absolutely. It's unusual, and the folks who said maybe or no, you know, those are the fortunate few. You've either gotten ahead of this game, or you've been able to avoid it altogether because perhaps you're, you know, a newer company that's disrupting the market for the folks that have legacy systems. All right, so some of the challenges are facing our organizations when we're dealing with legacy applications. No surprise, rising costs, outdated system, and the high cost and just time of maintaining compliance. In terms of rising costs, as systems age, it just becomes more expensive to maintain them. Vendors have a tendency to increase their license fees, their maintenance fees. The infrastructure to support those systems are sometimes dated, and finding the right parts or people to repair those systems when you can't just virtualize them can be problematic. And of course, for many legacy systems, you require specialized staff, and that specialized staff, technology people, they're very excited about new types of technology, always wanting to expand their portfolio of knowledge. They want to move on to the latest and greatest, and so they typically don't want to spend a lot of time on the legacy systems. And the folks that are, you have to typically pay them a premium. And of course, outdated systems, they just collect with mergers and acquisitions, or they collect over time, as was illustrated in the kind of the distorted portfolio. They're more challenging to work with. You know, APIs not as flexible, more difficult to customize or to modernize. If you think of digital transformation and modernization initiatives, having a collection of these outdated systems and the need to present a, you know, one pane of glass to whoever the customer is, whether it be an external or internal customer, becomes more and more expensive as these legacy or zombie applications kind of proliferate the data centers. And of course, they're not the first systems to get security patches. So when they're running on old technology, old operating systems, old databases, those systems aren't getting patched and fixed anymore, and they are the most obvious targets for bad actors in terms of exploits. Maintaining compliance, the landscape is always changing here. We're always getting new legislation, new privacy requirements. GDPR, CCPA are probably the most familiar to everybody right now, because we're all looking at you know, how do we comply with those regulations. So the ability to comply with changing regulations and be prepared for litigation is always top of mind for compliance and legal folks. Old systems are just not optimized to do that sort of thing. All right, so according to Gartner, between 2017 to 2020, IT organizations said they were going to decommission more than 3 times the number of applications they decommissioned since since the year 2000. Forrester did a study. Forrester found that among 3,700 IT leaders, they said they spent about 72% of their IT budgets on their legacy systems and just keeping the lights on. And what's interesting about that is folks are always challenged with where to find budget for modernization and digital transformation, which is, as we already acknowledged, more expensive when you're having to integrate with a bunch of legacy systems. All right, do you still have any of these? You know, I always get a kick about when the Lotus Notes one comes up, or CC Mail, legacy content systems listed there. We're seeing more and more of that. And that's probably a good, you know, really a good indication of one of the reasons why Platform 3 and OpenText thought it was a good idea to bring Magellan into the mix here. So why is this all happening? We're holding on to these systems because we've got to retain the information for a certain amount of time based on legal or compliance requirements. We've got lawyers who say we've got to hold on to this information. And we've got subject matter experts who don't exist necessarily, so we're not quite sure how to do anything with the legacy systems aside for continuing to let them run and access the data as needed. What you can't do is just back up the system and throw it away or restore from tape. Tape is not necessarily a very viable long-term form of archive, and it's very costly when it comes to any kind of discovery or audit reporting. Of course, you can't turn it all off and put it in a warehouse. And also, the compliance and legal requirements are making it increasingly challenging to pretend it doesn't exist, as well as the need to innovate are really forcing us to try to cut down the costs, our IT spend quite a bit, and simplify our infrastructure so that we can compete with, the new folks that are the folks that are coming in and upsetting our current markets that we each operate in. Market disruptors. There's the word I was looking for. So what do you think keeps older systems running in your organization?
So you can answer as many of these as you like, as you feel that they apply to your organization. Very interesting mix of all of it. In fact, for those 11% of you who said all of the above, that kind of says it all, I think a lot of it is, it's just not a priority with senior management. They haven't felt the pain yet.
Some of the final root causes, we've got duplicate and redundant systems. Folks are moving to the cloud. You move as much to the cloud as you can, but other stuff just can't be lifted and dropped into the cloud. Data center consolidation. I think the folks on the call are probably familiar with most of the challenges in this space. So it just really becomes too big of a challenge, and folks decide that they'll kick the can down the road as it is. So this is where the OpenText Info Archive platform steps in. It's a open standard XML-based archive where content, both structured and unstructured data, are considered first-class citizens within the repository. This is unique in the market space, as most application archives or data archives were originally designed for structured data and don't handle unstructured data very well. Sometimes you have to set up different infrastructures. With Info Archive, you can do this on one platform. It's purpose built. So as enterprise platforms go, it's one of the easier to deploy because it's purpose built specifically to be a compliant archive, to be able to search, retrieve on static information, to be able to provide secure access, role-based access, encrypting the information both at rest and on the fly, ensuring that the entire chain of custody for legal and compliance reasons is maintained, because this information, after all, we're in most cases archiving it because we do need to maintain requirements or be prepared for litigation. And it's right-sized in terms of the licensing approach. So it's not, it's not the traditional cost of a larger enterprise application. So you can expect a significant ROI based on your licensing and your maintenance fees alone. All right, so next slide. So we're going to build this out. So where Platform 3 comes into the scenario is we're a group of folks who have spent really 100% of our time on enterprise archive, application decommissioning, and defensible deletion, all things around how to get your arms around your data and your content and put it into a compliant archive so that you can free up your resources. Out of thousands of applications that we've helped our customers retired, we were able to automate some best practices using machine learning capabilities and now AI. Tom will talk about that in a little bit. To automate a lot of the work that was fairly laborious, somewhat error-prone, and often drove the cost of application decommissioning up exponentially to the point where certain sizes of applications, it just didn't make sense to decommission those anymore. So the first thing we do is we integrate with the source systems. As I mentioned, we've done thousands of decommissioning projects or applications, so we build a lot of connectors. Once we connect to those source systems, we run a tool called our Metalytics engine, where essentially if we can get access to the data, we can essentially reverse engineer the data relationships within that application. So you don't have data dictionaries, you don't have documentation, you don't have the subject matter experts, they've all left the building. As long as we can get at the data, we can tell you what your data is, how it's related, and to some degree where it's used as well. And by the way, how users need to access it, right? What are they searching on, et cetera. Once we've been able to do that, we can build an extraction. We build extraction processes. We extract and load that data into the Info Archive repository. Because we're tightly integrated with the Info Archive archive platform, we automatically build out the structure within Info Archive. So again, you're automating the build out of the archive. Once again, reducing the level of effort and reducing the number of errors. And then we also have a tool that is, I'll call it kind of a low-code, no-code tool that allows you to configure the user interface and the queries back into the system. But we go one step further by the level of understanding that we have of the data in your systems. We're actually able to pre-build some of the search and retrieval screens, and then it just becomes more of a matter of configuring some of the pre-built screens that we've automated, making certain that that they pass UAT and whatnot. And of course, there's usually some level of branding. You can also access this information through a REST API, so you can expose it inside of your line of business application. That is what we do from the process of application analysis, decommissioning, all the way through to maintaining chain of custody and setting up the archive. I'd like to hand things back over to Tom here so we can talk about how Magellan, with its AI capabilities, are now adding functionality into our Archon offering.
I appreciate that, Tracy. Thank you very much. Again, this is Tom Rieger on the AI and Magellan side of this conversation. As he mentioned earlier, and I think a lot of you shared from some of the polling questions, you have a lot of, let's call it less structured, unstructured repositories. Whether they're formal repositories like content management systems where you have them well organized, or you have kind of that chaos of network drives. In fact, I think the single largest response to that question was network drives. Well, within that network drive scenario, how do you understand what's in there? Because there's no metadata. Well, once you attach the Magellan text mining and AI capabilities into their Metalytics engine, we can now go after that much, much larger disk consuming use cases of unstructured. We've been talking for over 20 years in IT about how 80% of our data is unstructured. How do we then analyze that so we understand what's good, what's duplicate, and what can we just throw away? So what we do is we take these text mining concepts, the area of how do I go find keywords and phrases that are important to me? Maybe there are things like PII data that you're trying to identify. How about entities like a customer's name or a customer's number or something like that? And with those, we can then do things like auto-categorization, because without categorizing content, you don't know, once your records managers sniff that this project's in flight, they want to put a retention plan around that category of documents. Also, as you're doing this, we can identify, for instance, trends of sediment. So sediment isn't just the old Yelp thumbs up and thumbs down. Sediment starts getting into subjectivity down to the sentence level, especially if one of your legacy repositories isn't just a content repository. What if it's an old email system? And within that email system is a lot of information that you could go mine, so you can identify both risks and opportunities, but then you can also understand from a broader perspective what happened. Fifthly, there's summarizations. Especially in some of these larger documents, legal documents, lawyers are paid by the word. And for anyone who's a lawyer on this webcast or watching it, you know you are. So how do we kind of get to the root of it all? How do we summarize? How do we extract the water out and get to the premise of what's going on? So we also have the ability to do auto summarization. And finally, especially over time, how can we help you identify what's going on across these other 5 aspects of text mining across language sets? Not just English, Spanish, French, German. We have support for over 20 languages within Magellan to do the exact same type of semantic searching and metadata extraction as we do in English. And what I like to do for everyone is actually share an example that when we are done here, you can do for yourself. So we have within the public domain for you to try this Magellan text mining.opentext.com website. And what I would like to highlight is you could then take whatever text you may have in any form. It could be in a PDF file, a Word doc, it could be an email, it could be a text file, anything. And in this case, I'm just going to drop in an example of an email. So if you think about this text mining engine being attached to Archon and how it can go in and interrogate all of these unstructured repositories you have, and in this case, let's say it's an old Exchange server, and I want to have it identify where there's an opportunity or risk in PII data especially. So within this example of doing traditional text mining, you can see I automatically identify that this is English, that it's an overall negative tone. You can see here right out of the box, I can identify people, places, and corporate entities. We also have other types of more proper nouns we can identify as well, even if it starts getting into specific industrial lexicons or languages that apply to you. Healthcare, insurance codes for claims, things relating to EPA terms or other types of chemical terms. We have all kinds of taxonomies and other data cartridges to identify other relevant entities like that. You can see where I identify down to the sentence level, most positive and negative sentence, and how within, at least out of the box, this had to do with a prescription drug problem. That was the highest weighted definition there. Finally, I can see where within my example, I want to have it create a 5-sentence summary or up to 10% of what was inputted. So that was created automatically as well for me. I can go and look at my entities. You'll notice that it found all of these particular entities out of the box. And also, please note that relevancy and frequency do not always align here. Just because something is mentioned a lot in a document does not mean it is a relevant aspect of the document. That is where you start getting into the computational linguistics of grammar. And this is where we've really kind of created all these algorithms, data cartridges inside Magellan that can now be used by Archon, that as they're going in there and looking at thousands or millions of documents or emails or anything unstructured, it can pull this out for you. Then we start getting into concepts. These are our non-proper nouns, right? So in this case, I have complex concepts and simple concepts, and also ranking the relevancy of what those mean, because once you take these concepts, that is where out of the box we start to make it where you can then put things into categories. And then finally, the sediment. What were the positive and negative and neutral types of things? What was based on opinion versus fact, based on how the sentence is written, and then to give it a bit of a score down here on the bottom around what the sediment was as well. Again, I will be sharing with everyone the link to this environment for you to try for yourself, and so that you can do it and see what you can get out of your examples, whether it's, let's say, a press release from your company, or maybe you have a Word doc that you want to have Magellan automate the reading of and identify what's going on in that Word doc. It can be very useful across the board. So what makes content complicated to reconcile? You have this reality of stuff stored somewhere, and odds are you have the searchability is limited not by the document, by the metadata attached to the document. There may be a lot more inside that document that you want to analyze that is not in your tagging or your metadata. You're also only as capable to search on these documents to understand what's going on based on the limitations of the platform it's sitting in. So that is something you have to consider as well. You're really not sure what's redundant, obsolete, and trivial, rot, and what is real, especially if you start thinking about network drives. What's rot? What's old? What's unnecessary? Or more importantly, what's the latest version? What is the real version? And what's duplicate? You could very easily have dozens, if not hundreds of copies of the exact same file on your network drives. Let's kind of drill into what's real and what's important. And then especially with legacy content systems or some of these older systems, you have a very unfriendly user experience. You have security concerns. You have capabilities that are limiting. And also those three things kind of fit into this three-legged stool of maybe all of the above is lacking. But you don't have one of these. You have dozens or hundreds of these that exist somewhere. And as you are thinking about in your examples in your company, these could also reside out in the cloud. Has someone gone out there and used a free Dropbox and they put documents in a free Dropbox to share with somebody as kind of their new version of a sneaker net, dare I say, or a memory drive, but they use Dropbox. Well, what's in that Dropbox? Is there PII data out there that is putting your company at risk? How do you go and assess what that is? That is where we bring together Archon's ability to connect, interrogate, and understand what to do next from an output perspective, whether it's putting these new documents into a new production environment or to put them in an archive like InfoArchive, or you know what, just delete them. So we're able to interrogate and extract all of that, what we call semantic metadata. We can also, because OpenText is one of the largest providers of content management systems in the world, we understand how to effectively do large volumes of optical character recognition, say that 3 times really fast, on the fly with different technologies from OpenText. Because especially when you think about email systems, your Exchange servers, those Lotus Notes systems that are running in there, anybody who emails you a PDF file that's a scanned document, how many of those are actually image-based scans that you can't search versus they were OCR before they were sent to you? I would bet over 90% of the PDF files in your system that were emailed into you are not searchable at all. So you have to run them through some sort of process to make them that. It also then allows Archon, as it's recommending for you what to do at the other end, what is rot. So we give this same standard user experience with Archon with Magellan behind the scenes doing all of this unstructured work. And then to automatically place those documents into an applicable records plan. For any of you who are on this webinar or watching the recording who are records managers, you know exactly what I mean, is you have requirements within from a legal or compliance framework, how you need to maintain things. And then for you to decide what stays active, what do you archive? If part of your output out the other side is to figure out what your new normal should be when it comes to a repository, let's go put those things there. Otherwise, let's go put them into something like an InfoArchive that you pay for by the terabyte. You can put it on as big or as small a box as you need. You can have as many copies as you want. It's all about file size, total consumption of disk used. And it also then gives you a much more searchable experience. Out of the bottom there in those red boxes, you can only search based on the metadata for the document as it was captured. Now you have all this semantic metadata, so you can now search these documents much, much more effectively and interrogate them for what may come down the road. For instance, CCPA is the bane of a lot of companies' existence when it comes to having to identify and search for and potentially delete an individual because they're a California resident. What if some other state like Texas or New York, who has a large population, comes out with their own version and they tweak it slightly? Well, once we've gone through this exercise, you're now in a better position to lean into and understand how to better automate that new reality from a compliance and governance perspective. With that, and I'll kind of echo this for Tracy here as well, we have that original distorted portfolio with the senile and zombie things on the side. Now, if I remember the math correctly from Forrester, I think it was 72% of an IT's budget is there to keep the lights on. How much of that can you get back? And how much of that can you then use to do the new and the young types of projects in your organization to better transform? Between bringing Archon and OpenText Magellan together and have now this retired environment, or you may have some of this content you are looping back into the new side of the conversation, that can be your new reality. So with that being said, everyone, and Tracy, I'll let you have some parting words as well. You can try Magellan out within the Magellan textmining.opentext.com to appreciate how we can automate a lot of this interrogation that the Metalytics engine in Archon can do for you. We'll go ahead and call it a wrap. Thank you, everyone.